You're listening to the official podcast for the Games Institute. We are a multidisciplinary research center located at the University of Waterloo, studying all things games and interactive technologies.
One by one, we'll sit down with our researchers to talk about what they're studying and what they're playing. No jargon, no word counts, just the cool stuff.
Hello, and welcome back to the Games Institute podcast. I'm Marisa Benjamin.
And I'm Tobin Rossico.
Today we are joined by Justin Carpenter.
Hey.
Justin, you are a PhD candidate in English.
So they say.
We all pretend to be that.
Yeah.
We're going to talk all about your research, what your motivations are and inspirations. We're going to talk about your relationship to games and different niches that you represent inside of academia. But first, before we get into all of that, we're going to start with this question.
What is your earliest childhood memory of games?
Playing, I can't remember the name of the game, but I remember playing the NES must be WrestleMania of some sort. I played that with my dad.
Is that the one that Starman is in? The pink guy with the star for the mask? Oh, I
pretty sure.
A ton of that when I was a kid too.
It's awful. It doesn't work at all.
What is NES?
Nintendo Entertainment System. So the
first
Nintendo.
Normal
home
Nintendo.
console. Yeah.
I've always been too afraid to ask before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. There you go.
Yeah.
I like wrestling games.
Yeah.
Would you play with other people?
With my dad, mostly.
How old were you?
It's pretty young. 4 or 5, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah,
Playing a wrestling game.
I watched lots of wrestling when I was a kid. I liked it. I liked sports. I'm a pretty big sports person.
So the Nintendo Entertainment System has a very strange history in the place of the guests who we interviewed.
Okay.
Because it's the first home console, there's usually some story behind how that console showed up. Most guests are like, oh, it was a present for my dad, but he was just like, hey, this is actually for you. Is there a story about how you got your hands on a console?
I don't remember it at all. My dad really liked playing Civilization.
Okay.
The first one, you had to boot it up in DOS, and I thought he was making the game.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
And then one day there was a Nintendo. I think he just was doing well at work and showed up with a Nintendo, and yeah.
Were you immediately welcomed into playing it with him?
Oh yeah, it was for us to play. Yeah. Wow. I mean, I think I used to sit on his lap and watch him play Civ all the time. So he's a strategy game wizard. There's a game called Panzer General 2. He broke that game. He can beat it any way he wants. It just no problem. Always flawless victory. He's bored of it, but he still plays it because he just adores the aesthetic of that game, I think. Wow. So I think there's something comforting in playing it. And we were one of those families that ordered a computer through the mail, and it showed up with a big CD wallet full of games, and one of them was Civ 2. This was much later, but the whole time it was always I played games with Dad, and then we never actually bought another Nintendo system.
Fascinating.
We went to Sega because I really like Sonic.
The Genesis? That's the next one, yeah.
And then after that, it was the PlayStation. And part of the reason why was because I saw a random ad on TV for Metal Gear Solid.
Oh, boy. Okay.
And I was, I think, 9 or 10. And I said, oh, I'd love to play that, Dad. And then he was like, don't tell your mom. And I remember a lot of those experiences with my dad playing God of War, for example. He watched me play all of God of War. He'd just sit and watch me play. He loved it. This
is so sweet.
Yeah, that's really cool.
We play Halo. Whenever I go home, we just do Halo marathons on Legendary and get mad and then continuously die. And it'll be whole days.
Like still?
Yeah. He was playing the other night and he was telling me about how difficult it was. He's in Halo 2, and the part about Halo 2 that really, I think it's fair to say it sucks, is when you're on Legendary and you're playing co-op, if one of you dies, you have to restart at the checkpoint. What a stupid idea. That's horrible. So you're just going through endless walls of crazy enemies, and then suddenly one of you dies. And you have to say, well, you might as well stop playing because it's going to just reload everything. And he was just telling me, and his text message was in all caps because he was so into it. And he has a term so he's getting older, and his eyes don't work quite as well, looking at especially HD TV stuff. just burns his eyes, and he calls it Halo eyes because that's all he plays now is Halo. He loves it.
That's smart.
Yeah,
people are gonna pick that up.
Halo eyes.
Some
It's
Halo
a real,
eyes.
it's a real phenomenon.
Was it just games with you and your dad? Did you
No.
bond over movies and TV too?
Yeah, he showed me 2001: A Space Odyssey when I was like 7 or 8, and he's kind of a sci-fi nerd, a little bit. I think we watched Alien together when I was really young, and it
Nice.
Cool.
wrecked me. I had terrible night
I
terrors.
watched that very young too.
I haven't seen it. I was gonna watch it for some. I don't remember what it was, but I really wanted to watch it and I couldn't find it.
I do not think that you will like it.
Okay,
I think that
that's
you will.
probably fair.
Yeah, he doesn't like gore.
Oh yeah, it's pretty gruesome.
Yeah.
The thing that struck me about Alien then was that it was so real, and so I mean now I would call it logically consistent, right? Everything, form and content come together so perfectly that I think Ridley Scott made 2 really great films, and they're both probably accidents. That might be a controversial thing to say, but I think that Blade Runner and Alien are accidents that Ridley Scott kind of walked into and just fully realized worlds that are compelling on their own kind of thing. So
Interesting.
yeah, that's the experience. But I think for the most part, I bond with my dad about sports, and I played hockey a lot, and I played soccer a lot when I was a kid. I was those were the 2 things that I did most of all when I was younger. And I got injured and couldn't do it anymore, and so we just kind of transferred it to games and music definitely as well.
Did you pick up sport games? Like, do you play like NHL, 2K, whatever it is now?
I love FIFA, even though I hate FIFA. I don't hate FIFA because of the transaction stuff. I think it's obviously terrible. It's just it's almost like you're picking fruit from the bottom of a tree when you make it. I mean, it should be commented on. It's just I don't know if I'm the one to do it. But the thing I hate the most about FIFA is you'll be dominating. And I play co-op with a friend, and he has an ultimate team, and we just make runs through championship level. We just do runs of seasons together, and I can't pronounce the name of the team because it's a curse word. But the goal of this is to get to Division 1 and be the champs, and then hold that position. And you'll be playing a game, and you'll have 12 shots, and they'll have 2, and then suddenly the game just goes on rails. And they score 4 goals, and you can't get the ball back.
Yeah.
Your players stop working, basically. FIFA's wonderful when it's working, but rubber banding is a real problem in those games.
Interesting.
Yeah. One of the earliest game memories I have where I did something that really I was like, oh wow, I love games and I love this feeling was I'd play Punch-Out with my dad a lot.
Nice.
And he couldn't beat Soda Popinski. And he handed me the controller, and I just spent, I think he went to work. He was working graveyards, and graveyard shift.
Yes.
I had to sit and just grind away, and I was writing down the code so I could get to that fight. And I finally did it, and I went on a run all the way to the end of the game, and I was so excited to tell him that I did it. And I could see that he was a bit jealous, which was even better. I loved it.
How old were you then?
6 or 7.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
It was.
Those games are not easy.
No,
even
I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, for that. Yeah, that's wild.
But it was just all I did. It was like 2 weeks of just grinding on that because he was on shift for 2 weeks, and so I didn't see him very much. And then I was so pumped to tell him that I did it. Yeah.
I'm wondering what your player preferences. We talk about this because some other researchers here do work with player preferences and orientations toward games. Do you know what yours might be? I can give you a menu of options unless you know instinctively.
I don't.
So some folks are oriented toward goals. They want to be able to achieve goals when they play games. Some are more interested in the social elements of games. Some are story
narrative stuff.
Oriented. Yeah, narrative. Yep. Can you remember more?
So achievements, leaderboards, narrative, social interaction, like cosmetics, unlockables, that kind of stuff. I think that's a good start.
Yeah, more generally, like what type of thing do you think is the most important element of a game?
Aesthetic. It's easy. For
All
me,
right.
that's very simple.
Cool.
I think games are art, so I think that, well, maybe we shouldn't get into this.
Well, actually, I
I'm
think.
I'm dubious about the social ramifications of art
Oh,
in general.
I think
which
this is
fine.
like really good, like pre-work.
I mean, it tells
toward-
you a lot about who I am. I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
all of this is
Yeah.
all priming.
Yeah. I mentioned before form and content coming together. One of my favorite games in the last few years is Hotline Miami, and it's not because it's necessarily the funnest game to. I mean, it is, but it's not necessarily that it's the funnest game to play, but it's the way that game creates this perfect environment for. It's not immersion, it's just like total presence, in the sense of you're not in that world. It constantly pushes you outside of that world. But it's almost, I mean, this is an academic point. It's like a cocaine frenzy. That's literally what they're going for, and they nail it. When you're going for something and you nail it, I think that's exactly what I'm into in terms of game design. Like the Souls games, they're a perfect manifestation of. I mean, it's a term that's probably from an older paradigm where authors were considered more authoritative than they currently are. But I think that there is something where a team manifests a vision in a game, and like Hyper Light Drifter, Fez, these are manifestations of someone's vision, and whether it's a collaborative vision or it's one person, like Axiom Verge, for example, which is a game that was made by one person over 10 years. Like everything, it was one person. And it's awesome. It's such an interesting game, and it's that person's vision manifested through the form and the content of the game, which is what I'm into. Yeah.
Wow.
I think. Yeah. I also like to win. I'm a sports person, so I am competitive, but it's more that goes by the wayside pretty quickly when the game doesn't really push you to do that. So I wrote an essay for First Person Scholar about Hyper Light Drifter and how it forces you to go through the process of mastery. It's a very conscious thing, and I think that's maybe, to be more specific rather than just aesthetics, it's when a game wants you to go through a certain process and makes you do that, and at the same time you're doing something that's emerging from that. It gives you that feeling of something emerging from it. That's whether you can take that with you into the real world or not, as I've said, I'm dubious of, but I think obviously you are part of the real world, so there's something valuable inherently in that, in my opinion. I don't know.
Wow. I'm getting inside your head a little bit here.
Okay.
Well, except I don't use that term in the way that people usually use that term. I'm trying to step inside so that I can understand. I want to pin this for now because all of these seeds that you've planted with us are going to carry through the rest of what we're going to talk about. So let's transition into talking about research, and then we'll pull apart these threads and weave them together and figure out how the world of Justin's research actually works.
Oh, okay. This might be actually really helpful for me, so let's do it.
Oh my gosh, there we go. We've set a goal.
Let's do it.
So what is your current degree? Basically summarize your academic biography. And yeah, see if maybe you can give us an elevator pitch about what you are currently doing and interested in.
Okay, so you want the quick notes of my academic upbringing first?
Yeah, purposefully open-ended so that because everybody has this really long academic biography where they can trace it back to that one day in grade 5. So use sort of like an instinctual method of telling us about you and your academic biography in a way that actually is meaningful to what you are doing.
Okay. Well, I'm from a place in northern Alberta where you're not necessarily pushed to go to university. You're more pushed to go to trade school and be part of the oil patch and and that's fine. Those people work really hard. I just don't have the constitution to do it, to be totally honest. And so I had no idea that universities were even possible. For me, I was a fairly average student in high school. I found music and became really obsessed with playing guitar, playing 9 hours a day. I hurt my back really bad playing hockey. And so sitting and playing guitar was really all I could do for a while. And it was like 9-hour days just grinding on the guitar. And sold my goalie pads, started playing music, and decided I was going to study music. The problem is, so where I'm from, there's a college, and it's a pretty good college. This is not going to be short. Sorry. It's a fairly good college because the courses are really small. But I quickly realized that I was nowhere near trained enough to actually study music. So I switched to an English degree. I was doing kind of both. I was trying to decide. And so I immediately decided, I like reading books a lot, so I'll just study English. And then you do 2 years there, and you're supposed to transfer to Edmonton. And sorry if you're from Edmonton, but I really hate Edmonton.
I hate Edmonton as well.
I'm not a fan of Edmonton.
One of the worst nights of my life was spent in the Edmonton bus depot, sleeping on the floor. I'll tell you that a different time.
I've been there, and it's not, yeah. I think Edmonton's better now, but I chose to go to Calgary. My family, they come from Calgary originally, and we're all Flames fans, so we cheer for Calgary Flames.
Nice.
So it was a pretty easy choice, and when I got to the University of Calgary, I quickly realized, like, whoa, this is a different pace. This is a different expectation altogether. Teachers didn't know me, so they didn't know how I was thinking about stuff, and I had to learn pretty quick how to get my ideas across. So it was good in that way. And then I got a job. So I got my degree, and I got a job, and I hated it, and I got really sick. Just not just emotionally, it manifested physically. And quickly realized, I think I have to go back to school. And I didn't do honors, so I had to upgrade for 1 year. And then I went to do a master's in the UK in post-colonial literature at the University of Leeds.
Hey, nice.
It's it's a great school. I miss the UK a lot. And so I did that for a year, and I can't even begin to describe how great it was. It was just an awesome time. Lots of things happened. And I came back and decided that I wanted to talk about games. And so I just kind of applied for the PhD here, and that's it. It was a pretty easy decision to come here because there's Games Institute. You could actually study literature and games together, and I'm interested in that. So that's more or less the journey here.
Was it like a spontaneous moment where you came back and you just think, I'm gonna go for games now?
I got fatigued with studying post-colonial literature for reasons that are. I don't think it's an indictment of the field at all. I think it's a really great field, and it's an interesting. Post-colonial theory is very interesting and it's complex. But I quickly realized that my heart just wasn't in it, and if you're going to do that kind of work, your heart has to be in it. And I think that's just being respectful of the seriousness of that research. And I learned a lot studying post-colonial literature, but I quickly realized I was more interested in media and games and stuff like that. And so the decision was pretty straightforward from there to come to Waterloo, because I'd heard that it was a good school for tech, and I thought, the English department's probably doing cool stuff because they probably have to. The only way to survive. Yeah. The next part of the question was my research, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm studying games and certain types of games, I guess, that use procedural content generation, and comparing them to a stream of literature that some people call generative, some people call combinatoric literature.
We're going to need to unpack a lot of these terms.
I'm working on it. It's tough. So generative art is usually thought of as art that's made with computer or something technological. It's like a system that's imposed from the outside, and it interacts with all of the assets and it creates something, usually fractal design, or if in text it can be like text generative stuff. You just have outputs from what you've put into it, and it mixes and permutates and combines them in a bunch of different ways.
Okay, I think I got it.
And in literature, what's usually thought of as generative or combinatoric is stuff like the Oulipo, or other people like, I think his name's Raymond Roussel, or Alfred Jarry, these French pre-surrealist figures who were trying to look at the idea of possibility in literature. And some of them would use writing constraints, so they'd use like lipograms, which are pieces of writing that don't feature a certain vowel or a certain character. So there's Georges Perec is a figure who wrote, it's called La Disparition. It's like a void, and it's this mystery thriller horror story where everything's missing this vowel E, which in French that's complete. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. It's a type of intense virtuosity to be able to write something in French without using that vowel.
Yeah,
he didn't use any words that included E, or he omitted
He wrote a
E?
300 and some page novel without using that vowel.
Like he omitted it from
entirely.
words?
He just wrote without using it. So he picked words that don't have E in them. Wow. And the interesting thing for me is that he builds a narrative out of it. And so I'm looking at how people interacting with procedural generated content in video games narrate their experience in the sense of narrative emergence. And so when you read a book, the object texts that I'm looking at are Vladimir Nabokov's Pale Fire, which is supposed to be this poetry collection, but it's a novel because the poetry collection has commentary. And it's kind of like House of Leaves, where you have to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It's Espinosa's idea of ergodic literature, this literature that makes you work. And looking at the idea of the poetry collection as a system with certain implications and certain forces. It's a structure, right? And he turns it into a narrative structure because he's aware that the reader's going to fall for his traps and fall for certain readings. There's a good example where someone's interviewing Nabokov, and there's a date that keeps showing up in this book, and it's Jonathan Swift's birthday. But it's also Alexander Pushkin's birthday, and Nabokov's Russian, and so he meant Pushkin. But he's like, I like that you thought it was Swift. That's cool. That's a different reading.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to say that when you engage with, I think any game or any piece of literature, and this is based on rhetorical analysis and also on in rhetoric in games and rhetoric in literature, and the idea of process, the process of reading, so reader response theory. I think it actually would be, for me, I think it, as a person who studies literature, it's irresponsible not to think of the idea of reception or response, because that's what I've always been interested in, is this idea of response. To the point where in post-colonial studies, I was looking at films that are, have you heard of Attenarjoué?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Fast Runner. I wrote a piece about how, despite using almost an oral approach to film narration, it's a very interesting idea. It never once situates a non-indigenous, specifically a non-Inuit, or I can't remember which non-Inuit. Just apologies if that's not correct, but the way that it doesn't situate someone from outside of the community at all, it just invites you in, and you have to participate. It makes you do that work. So one chapter is on Pale Fire, and it involves like Cortazar's book Hopscotch, which is a book that it starts with a list of rules, which is a recommended way to read the book. But there's also another way to read the book, and there are chapters that you can omit. And so I have a chapter where I compare that to Breath of the Wild, where you can play in literally any order.
That's really cool.
Like Walter Benjamin uses this idea of epochs. So current epochs are manifesting the dreams of prior ones. And so we talk a lot about cinema and games, and it makes perfect sense, but I think the relationship between narrative structure in film and narrative structure in literature has been compared a lot, and it makes sense to compare it. And I make the argument that games and literature can do some interesting things together if we look at them that way. So I was going to say this, one of the other texts I'm looking at that's a piece of literature is Thomas King's Greengrass Running Water. And the other thing that's interesting about these books that I'm looking at is that they have this controlling idea or metaphor. So it's not just a poetry collection when you read Pale Fire, but there's also this idea of chess, this infinite version of chess where the idea is to transcend the board and end up in the other world. And Nabokov's obsessed with this idea of the other world. His books are constantly thought of as extremely ornamental to the point of being, he's almost showing off. And I fundamentally disagree with that. I think he's extremely moral. He builds moral worlds. That's what he's doing. And whether you like those worlds morally or not is not the point he's trying to make, I think. But he has a clear sense of what's he thinks is right and wrong, and he embeds that in the processes of the experience of reading his book. He's teaching you something. It's this process of discovery. There's a book about this idea. And then Thomas King uses this idea of, there's a great piece where it talks about this idea of setting traps and using the three, the three-tiered structure of the joke, where it's like the premise and then I forget the term for the middle part, and then there's the punchline. And what King does is he comes up with this idea, rather than indigenous literature being post-colonial literature, it's interfusional in the sense that it mixes a bunch of different modes and ideas, and it crosses between the idea of being a novel and the idea of being an oral storyteller, telling situation, right? So it's a different attitude towards the listener-speaker idea. So that's kind of another model that I look at. And then the last one that I'm mainly looking at is No Man's Sky, which is, there's a great, I'm such a fan of this guy. His name's Gareth Damian Martin. He writes for Eurogamer, or he wrote for Eurogamer. He wrote for Killscreen. He has a zine called Heterotopias, and it's about architecture and poetics of space in video games. And he wrote a review for Killscreen about No Man's Sky, and he compared it to Borges's Library of Babel. And the first thought I had that was in response to that was, the interesting thing about Library of Babel, if you haven't read it, is that it's made of these I think it's like 23 characters. So it's the alphabet, and then it's, I think, the period and the comma and maybe the dash. Or the hyphen. I can't recall exactly. And the idea is that there's this library where every possible combination of those characters exists, and in it is every book ever written, including his story and your biography. And there are just a bunch of people, they're like archivists or librarians, just going through, and they're trying to interpret this. And obviously this is a model for the cosmos in some way, right? Borges is always thinking about, he's almost putting literary concepts into action as possible cosmologies, is how I think about it. And he's playing around with it. And No Man's Sky is very much this. It's this library. The curious thing about the Library of Babel, the story, is that one of the characters missing is a question mark. And as soon as I read that, I thought, oh, that's so interesting, because the only people who are asking questions of a game like No Man's Sky are the people playing it. And when the game came out, I was so excited, and there's this person, I interviewed him for First Person Scholar. His name's Andrew Reinhardt, and he started the Archeo Gaming blog. So he's an archaeologist, and he's studying archaeology in games. And he came up with, I think with other people, I apologize, I don't remember their names, they came up with a rules of engagement for archaeologists in No Man's Sky kind of thing. And I was so excited about this idea, because it's fundamentally, it's a play style. Right? They're imposing these rules, and it manifests as this experience or this play style. So how you know the game is through those rules on some level. And I guess the next step from that for me was I had to play the game, and when it first came out, it was kind of a mess. It didn't really have what they thought it was going to, what people thought it was going to have, and so immediately I was like, oh, I don't know if I should talk about this game, but I stuck with it and I loved it. I thought it was, I still think it's brilliant, and they've only made it better and better. And they did an update where these characters, these non-playable characters, start showing up in the middle of the story, and they tell you, well, I mean, the only thing that really matters is money, or the only thing that really matters is experiencing everything. Mm-hmm. And I was, oh, they're telling us how to play the game. Like, they're trying to help us figure out how to play this game, which really has no structure other than this, you can do whatever you want, and it's so big you'll never see anyone else, right? And now I'm really happy that I stuck with it, because there are people doing really cool things with No Man's Sky, and it's completely paratextual. So it's outside of the game. Mm-hmm. There's civilizations, and they have Olympics. So there are 2 civilizations, and they agree once a year to do an Olympics. There's a really funny video. This father and his, I think, 9-year-old daughter playing. They recorded their footage, and then they turned it into a vignette of a story of them escaping pirates. And she's this like great, she's supposed to be this like Han Solo-esque figure and she's like, I don't care about you, you're pirates, and she's just like blowing these pirates down. And so people are telling their own stories, and the game's an invitation to ask those questions of those spaces. And there's my all-time favorite thing about this game is that there's one person called it's Boyd Gaming, and I actually showed this in a conference presentation, and everybody laughed, which was nice. Boyd Gaming doesn't really seem to play the game other than to do base building, and there's a whole string of these amazing structures. You walk over, so I went to one of them. It's a base, so you can find it if it's been uploaded. And I went to this planet, and I went to this base, and it was a KFC. I just walked over this hill, and there's a KFC. It has automatic sliding doors, and it says, "Welcome to KFC" when you walk in. And it's just a KFC that's empty, desolate, left alone in space.
Interesting choice.
It's... I think that there's something interesting to talk about there. It's kind of like Minecraft, but the way that it's done and the way that people are collaborating and telling their own narratives is what I meant by narrative. And I think that's good. I think that explains it.
Yeah, I think I have a theory, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm invested in this theory, so also be gentle.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that the threads here have to do with a combination of like author function, death of the author, and paratextuality and participatory rhetoric and agency. So like if death of the author or author function, which refers to the author's role once the textual object is published and into the world, if that is the hook, or if that is like the ground truth of what you're trying to explore inside your research, then everything else becomes different ways of undermining and subverting that as the paradigm. So, because what you're trying to do is say that there's something going on here with the author, whether it be a text, a movie, or a game where there's a team of authors. There's something going on here where they are creating their vision and making it come to life. But then what they've created transcends just that. But it also doesn't, because it's still a reflection of that.
Right.
So everybody who engages with books or movies, and you gave some excellent examples. I don't know how to pronounce the movie. I always called it Atawandrat.
Atanarjwe.
Oh my gosh.
I might be mispronouncing it as well.
It's totally not up to me to even know how to pronounce it. It's such a wonderful film. And with that one, it almost like undermines the validity of talking about the author in a way, and also talking about the role of the viewer, because it completely decenters all of that. It's subjectivity and objectivity in that become very, very blurred. Right. Which is, an excellent lens into thinking about all of this. Like, why are we so concerned with subjectivity and objectivity as false binaries?
I think that's there's a lot to unpack there. I think you're dead on in terms of...
No way.
Well, the structure of each chapter is based on this model that I've kind of I mean, it's maybe a cliche in game studies to look at authorship, agency, and emergence, but that's what I'm doing because
I think there's so much.
It crosses not just generative art and generative literature per se, but it definitely is a key topic in both literature and video games. Mm-hmm. But the next key thing that I would add is that there's this idea of presence. So presence isn't just the feeling of being there. Presence is defined in so many different fields, so many different things. And I'm quite partial to the definition that Hans Gumbrecht, he's a literary scholar, and I think he's probably a philosopher. He probably counts as a philosopher, who teaches at Stanford. And he talks about presence as this, it's almost the figures in the process of reading bring the past into presence. So when you're reading, the example the example he uses is when you listen to Janis Joplin's voice, mm-hmm. it immediately it turns time backwards in a particular way. It's very of its time, and it brings it to you. And he's not so interested in whether or not that's real. What he's more interested in is that there's a desire on both sides for that to happen. And presence in that sense makes me think of authorship as not only processes. So Michel Foucault talks about the idea of the authorial function, which is this framing. It's almost a rhetorical framing or a discursive framing around the text that shapes what the text is because you know what the author is. So there was a recent thing where I think Ken Levine, the lead
Gears of
guy,
War?
I think is BioShock and System
Oh
Shock.
yeah, okay, yeah.
I forget I don't know how to
It's
pronounce his
Levine.
name. Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so he was saying that one of the most difficult things about being a game designer and trying to market your games is that if you don't couch it in the like in almost an auteur theory kind of thing where it's one person who's being the figurehead of the project, people aren't interested and marketing doesn't really go as well. For example, someone like Kojima, if you just people give him a lot of flack because Kojima takes so much credit for all of his stuff, but if he didn't do that, his games might not sell as well. Yeah. And that's an interesting argument that Foucault definitely talks about, and Bourdieu as well, who talks about like spheres of cultural production and all. And I think that's interesting. I like to think of authorship in the sense of like Stanley Fish talks about reading Milton's Paradise Lost as when you read it and you're going word by word rather than sentence by sentence, what's actually happening in the development of that sentence in terms of what is your experience of it. It's a process that you're being led through. So it's a rhetorical process almost. And so I'm thinking of authorship in terms of its being a rhetorical process that's mediated by a conceptual system, which totally is, it's intended to divorce author from work. It's almost apolitical, consciously apolitical. And yet when people play it, there's still this idea that it's designed and that you can interact with it and that you can find narratives in it, whether or not they're there per se, because they're embodied, and narratives a fluid and flexible thing.
What do you know about interpretations of these theories that take a less extreme stance? So something that accounts more for different ways of engagement and presence on the side of the person who engages. So, for example, is there a way to break apart what we mean when we say author? So that author function could have validity, but it also doesn't entitle the author to feeling some type of ownership or authority over it. And I mean, my favorite example of this all the time is J.K. Rowling. A lot of the choices that she made when she was writing Harry Potter, the series, are still relevant in the way that we interpret and read. But today when she's on Twitter announcing that we should be interpreting things in specific ways, I'm like, okay, you know what? This is where I want to lean into the death of the author stance, which says that her opinion is completely irrelevant. But I think it's because we have to feel like it's one or the other, or we have to accept all of the things involved in author function and other ways to center the author. So I guess going back to what I was saying in the question is like, is there a way to parse those things and better account for the user's role in the presence?
Sure. The way that I've been looking at this is, on some level, the death of the author is, I think of it as relevant in the philosophical context and related to the idea of death of God. And Barth later talks about his desire for the author as part of the experience, right? Barth's always thought of as this theorist of desire, like literary desire. And the desire for the author, the absence of the author always implies the presence of the author, if you're using deconstructionist terms, because absence and presence they're two sides of the same coin. So if something is absent, then it haunts the text. It's like a specter. There's traces of authorship in these texts, even if you don't think that those are what the meaning of the text is, right? So I think in literature, and part of what Barth is doing is he's trying to decenter the bourgeois aspects of the novel, and it's difficult because the novel is a bourgeois genre altogether. It's completely bourgeois, and he's trying to think of what it would be like to be in a post meaning in the sense of authorial, hegemonic. When you read a book and the author's like, that's not what I meant at all, that kind of meaning, I think he's trying to decenter that and say, well, no, because when you read a book and you talk to your friends about it, that's not necessarily the experience that they had either. And I think this is fundamentally related, and I think it's related to the development of cinema. And if you look at, for example, Vladimir Nabokov's novel Lolita, and you look at the film Lolita, Nabokov said, it's a great film, it's not my book, though. And part of the problem with adaptation is that more often than not, you could even have the author write the screenplay, and
which J.K. Rowling does often.
Exactly,
yeah,
they write
at least
the
for these new ones,
screenplay. Yeah. So, sorry to cut you off.
No, that's good. Yeah.
And what happens is that it's not your vision, right? I remember going and seeing The Golden Compass and thinking, well, this is not what I thought of.
They have a new HBO special.
It's great. I think once they get further into the other novels, it will get better, because that's what happened for me with the books too. I fell in love with those books in the second book. But that disagreement is the lifeblood of the humanities. Like, we need it. Disagreement's the whole idea, and that idea that when you read a book, you're kind of bringing it to life in that moment. And I think of it in terms of, we write essays in present tense when we're talking about books, because it's activated, just like games are, right? When you play a game, it's activated. Film kind of just happens, but a book doesn't. There's a process involved in making that book. You're interpreting signs on the fly. Like Vonnegut says, you should be nice to your readers when you're writing, because what they're doing is they're taking thousands of dashes and dots and turning them into something that we call meaning. And there's a whole camp in literary theory. They're called intentionalists, and they think that the authorial intent is tantamount to the purpose of the book, for example. And
I don't like that.
Well, sure, that's I think we maybe trained not to like that. And I think also we just know that when you look at these texts, what emerges from them is so much of yourself in relationship to another world, something alien. I think, like Joseph Brodsky says, when you read poetry or when you write poetry, the first thing you realize as a poet is that you're alone. And he said, and I think I agree with that, even when you go and see a film and you feel jealous, for example, and wish you could have made that film, that's one example. And the idea that something is meaningful because it's intentional, I also think falls apart under some scrutiny. there's an intentionalist who, in response to these claims, came up with the idea of distinguishing between meaning and significance. Meaning is what the author intends. It's inevitably lost and dispersed throughout the text, and you could get closer to it or further away from it, but there's always that idea that something is significant for you in the experience. You're like, what you notice in a film is not the same as what I notice. It's like it's Barth's idea of it's like the punctum and the studium in photography. Are you familiar with these ideas? So the studium is the way that it's framed and what the author intended to say. So there's a photo of nuns walking down the street, and there's just intense poverty around them. This is one of the examples he brings up. And he calls the punctum that thing that wounds you subjectively. It's the thing that you experience, no one else does. And I think that's presence. I think that's this type of aesthetic presence it's very particular. It's the details that you notice. And I would call that, rather than meaningful and worrying about meaning, which you can't try to define what the meaning of life is, and you're just lost forever. But what the significance of life is, and what the significance of a text is that it's that environment that you're acting in when you're reading or you're playing a game or you're watching a film. Like, it's games theory thinks about this idea of this illusory space. I think that's an aesthetic space. I don't know if I totally agree that it's any different, and I think Gumbrecht agrees. He wrote a book called In Praise of Athletic Beauty, and he ties the aesthetic appreciation of sports and athletes in ancient Greece and this cult of the body idea. He ties that to presence pretty clearly, in my opinion. And another idea that I think maybe sums this up is when you think of something as being tonal or having a tone, like a satirical tone or a parodical tone, that's intentionalist on some level. The author's doing that. Mood is different. I would distinguish between tone and mood. Mood is when you look outside and you're standing beside someone and they're just like, today's kind of a bummer. And you feel it too. That's what Gumbrecht talks about as mood. And you read a book and there's something that's happening between you and perhaps everyone else that's playing a game or a book or reading a book. Like if you have a reading group, you're going to have a bunch of different people who experience it differently. And one of the interesting things that ties this all together for me is that when you read about procedural content generation in games, one of the main things that people talk about is mood. Mood is collaborative. It's a reaction to tonal things. So someone who is deeply involved in the Games Institute and who I know, Gerald Voorhees, he wrote quite a while ago. He chuckled when I brought this up because he was like, "Oh, I thought I was done with that." He talks about the structure of agency and Halo in one of his essays. I can't remember where it was published, but if you just look up his name and structure of like agency, or you'll probably find it. And I think it's in Halo 2. And he comes up with this definition of agency as making meaning in a world not of your own creation.
Oh, I like that.
And I changed it a bit to significance. And that ties it all together, I think, quite well.
Making significance in a world not of your own creation.
And if that's not what people are doing in No Man's Sky, I have no idea what they're doing. And that's the tie, I think.
Cool. We got there in the end. That's
yeah,
like
it all came together. Yeah. I don't know how much time we have left.
Well, we actually probably are now into the wrapping up.
Okay. That's
time.
Great for me because I have to go and
we
provide food.
Yeah,
we're
busy
hitting 50
life.
minutes. So.
Okay. I go on.
I think
definitely.
I wanted to ask one question about the Hyperlight Drifter article.
Okay.
So, because you talked about that with the sense of like mastery and the philosophy of like the body and the mind and the illness in the game. But I was curious about mastery and how games mitigate or allow failure and what the failure of the player means in terms of like the philosophical sense of mastery. Because would failure, like obviously failure in games leads to mastery, but is that the same in a philosophical sense?
I think so. Part of the process of mastery, I mean, I was talking about the Dao De Ching, and one of the things that religious works, and they're so open to interpretation, it's really difficult to say exactly what they mean. But I took this, I really appreciate the idea of non-action. Rather than inaction, non-action, do not act unless it's absolutely the point where you need to. And when I was playing that game, I immediately thought of this idea, and the constant grinding of, like in that piece I talk about doing the 800 dash chain thing. It took forever. And eventually it became as though I wasn't even doing anything. It was just, I just did it, and it was just in the moment. And I talk about flow a lot too. And I think in that game, the way that failure works is maybe not, you definitely improve, and you definitely get better. And I think that the idea of truth in most religious works is very similar to that idea, where you're attempting to hit the mark, right? It's not that there's something out there that's there and that's true. It's that you are aiming for something. I took a lot of religious studies courses, and this idea of the arrow's path being, like in Buddhism, it's a very important idea of following this true path of the arrow. Sorry, I'm kind of working in circles, I guess, but philosophically, I think failure is just inevitable, and that, I mean, sorry to be a bummer, but life is suffering, and this is what a lot of the ancient texts tell us, is that yes, it's suffering, but there are ways to mitigate it, and there are systems of thinking that really help mitigate that suffering to some degree, and also they help mitigate you creating more suffering. And I mean, inaction, if you misinterpret something to be inaction rather than non-action, which is a choice, non-action is still it's purposive and agentful, right? As compared to inaction, where you're not doing anything. So even doing something like playing that game over and over and failing, I think of Super Meat Boy. It's just coming to my head, where you finish a level and there's just all the other times where you failed, and then the one run is the last one left. And I think there is something satisfying in that. And games are pretty interesting in that way, because failure is part of the process. But I mean, life is also sort of like that. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there was a relationship there. I haven't thought about that. That's a really interesting question. The process of mastery and the process of failure are probably the same system, if you're thinking in those terms.
That's kind of the correlation that I saw. And it made me think of, have you played Cuphead?
Yes.
So you remember the pool in the second aisle that you can go to and see how many times you've died?
Yeah.
I wonder if there's some masochist out there. I mean, we're all kind of masochists if we play that game. But someone who wants to play that game and to go to that pool and see you've died no times, or, if that's even possible. I imagine it is.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Goodness gracious. So
I know that there's an achievement in Hyper Light Drifter that I'll never get, which is to play the game without dying. Good luck. I think it might even be play the game without getting hit.
Okay.
It might be
it's
never
next
get
level
hit.
Stuff.
Good luck.
Yeah.
I did the 800 dash, and that was enough for me. I play that game now mostly for pleasure and contemplation time, because I've played it a few times now. So it's,
whenever games put in an achievement that just seems so unachievable to me, that strikes me as they're asserting their mastery over the player.
That's a way to think about it. I think it might be also an acknowledgement that there are people like that will do that. But
people do no-hit runs from Dark Souls or even Demon Souls, I think, all the way through every single Dark Souls. And if they get hit once, they have to start over. And they've done it.
I was in a great conversation with some folks from Q Collaborative Lab, and we were talking about how mastery is a patriarchal term. And I mean, it's making me rethink the way that I approach things, and it's also a very interesting way into thinking about game studies. And I think actually setting it beside failure and noticing that they probably are similar structures is a way to circumvent that.
I think they're the same structure. Probably.
And then suddenly it feels a little less, problematic in a way to think about mastery if you can acknowledge that failure and mastery are the same structure.
Right. I think that makes sense.
It's more satisfying.
You sure get in a lot of trouble with language and the idea of something being patriarchal, because language itself is probably, to some degree, at least at some, guaranteed at some point in its history, every word could probably be thought of as patriarchal, every concept, just because of the nature of how societies have developed over time. And acknowledging that weight is important, but I think thinking of it in a multiplicity of ways is it's not productive. I don't want to use that language, but what I mean is that it creates different experiences every time, and that's, to me, that's what art is, and that's why art is beautiful. It's just, you look at it and it's this box, and every time you look through it, it's almost functioning like what's a good way to look at it? It's like a prism, and you look through it at every different angle, and it gives you new things every time. And to me, that's my definition of something being great art is, and even if it's not even divorced from its context per se. So there's the idea of like the Black Square or anything by Jackson Pollock, and you walk up to it and it's just coffee stains and ash, and or it's just a black square, and you stand in front of it, and there's this idea of it's John Dewey. He's a pragmatist, American pragmatist, but he was really influenced by Buddhism, I think, mostly, and so he's this interesting mix of pragmatism and I'm not going to say it's not practical or pragmatic to study Buddhism, because I think it is, but there's almost this paradox at the heart of his work, and he talks about artwork as experience. So when you look at a painting, there's a process that you go through where you're grazing the painting. I don't think grazing is his idea. There's someone else's. This is someone else's idea, I think, that I've just in my head put together. Like, what is the process that an artwork is making you go through? And are you going to go along with it? Or are you not going to go along with it? And what happens when you don't? And what happens when you do? Like Nabokov talked about this idea of the ideal reader. I think this comes up in Reader Response Theory a lot. Yeah. The ideal reader for Nabokov is a rereader, someone who does it again and again and again and again. And that's because of his view of nature, which was things pretend to be other things. They hide themselves. And until you go deeper and deeper and deeper, you won't ever discover anything. It's just this. So this is a debate in games and pop culture for sure. The idea of spoilers, they don't exist, because the whole. For me, they don't exist. In that, the first time I watch something, it's great and I enjoy it, and sometimes plots are really fun. But I don't feel like I have time to really investigate how those plots are unfolding, what's happening on the level of not just figuration, but what is the process that I'm experiencing when I go through this? Where is this persuading me to go in my thinking? And how is it doing that on a technical level? Like, techniques are there for a reason. They're there to persuade you of certain readings or taking you in a certain direction. Like a metaphor is telling you that two things that are completely unalike are alike. That's a rhetorical process. That takes incredible amount of work to do that kind of thinking. Like Shakespeare's metaphors still boggle my mind, and I've been reading Shakespeare for 15 years, 20 years. And every time I read Shakespeare, it's new again in a certain way, and I'm different. Like Heraclitus's comment that you never step in the same river twice I think that's true. I think that's maybe one of the only things I think that's true. It's fundamentally true. Yeah.
So what games are you currently playing?
Metal Gear Solid 5, because I can't afford Death Stranding. I'm always playing Rocket League.
Okay.
I like Rocket League a lot. I like Rocket League for very particular reasons. It has nothing to do with cars. I'm not a car person. It has everything to do with me being a soccer person. I like soccer. I like the speed of it. And when I moved back from my master's in the UK, I didn't really have anywhere to go. I took a year because I wanted to get into school here. And so I just went and lived with my cousin, and Rocket League came out for free, and we all had PlayStation 4s, and we all had monitors, and, and he had a 60-inch TV, and we would either play online together or we would do couch co-op on this big TV.
Oh, cool.
And we just all fell in love with Rocket League. We called it, so they're all very big hockey fans, and they call NHL games Chell. And so this is REL. We play REL or RL. And we also fell deeply in love all at the same time with Hotline Miami. And we were kind of playing Rocket League and Hotline Miami at the same time. And I think the games and the attitudes the games ask you to bring are weirdly similar. And whether that's good or not, I don't know. But it's really fun to play Rocket League. I just finished Spider-Man on PS4.
That one is extremely aesthetic.
Wow, it's good. It was one of the first games that really made me feel, and we can probably end with this if we need to go. It was one of those games where you're playing in this open world, and it's just like every other open world in some sense, where there's just stuff showing up all over your map, and you kind of have this, wow, how am I going to get all of this done? But then you're like, I'm Spider-Man. I have to get it done. And it was one of those few experiences of an open world for me where who I was playing as informed my playing style entirely, and I felt
That's the basis of my dissertation.
That's awesome. Yeah. Spider-Man PS4 nails this, in my opinion. And I mean, if I wanted to write about this, or if you want to write about this, you could talk about the way that you move through that game, which is a completely revelatory system of movement. It's so brilliant, and it's what you're doing the whole game, and every time you do it, it's fun. And it makes you, through that process of swinging around the city, you're Spider-Man. There's a crime that shows up, and you have to go solve it because you're Spider-Man. And I think the game really, it kills that part of it. It's so good.
I think that Spider-Man would be an incredible focus for a dissertation chapter of yours, because it's packed. It's packed with a lot of the themes of what you've been talking about for the past hour. Like, you've got adaptation in there. You've got tons of aesthetic. There's interesting things to play around with morality wise, and you're engaging with other characters, agency, and all of these things come up. Plus, you could talk a lot about the creators and the locality, like when it was released and who's I mean, there's so much in there. If it's not a chapter of your dissertation,
it's not. I don't want to steal your thunder either.
I'm doing something different.
Okay, so that'd be,
I mean, the same but different. Different spin, same kind of basic ideas. But
I would test that out as a conference paper. I think that'd be fun. I'm speaking at a conference in March about the idea of moods in Kentucky Route Zero and how you're experimenting and creating moods in that game. And I think that some of the research would probably inform Spider-Man research. Maybe anything. I don't know. Yeah.
Close it out.
Yeah, well, my brain is delighted and also a little bit sore.
This is fun. I had fun.
Thanks for coming. We had fun too.
I hope.
Yeah, lots of things to think about now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. See you next time.
Yeah.